Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Steelman, Director of Alumni Career Development and Professional Engagement at William Mary. It is my pleasure to welcome you to day three, sorry, of William Mary's 2024 Professional Development Week. William Mary is your career partner for life. The university has committed to lead the preparation of lifelong learners, equipped to navigate rapid change and thrive from their first job to their last. This week of programming designed for the entire William Mary community will cover a variety of topics relevant to people at all points of their career journey. When designing the sessions, we focused on the NACE career competencies, which are career and self-development, communication, equity and inclusion, leadership, professionalism, teamwork, and technology. We are truly grateful for the continued engagement of our William Mary community to support one another's professional success. I want to acknowledge and thank all the William Mary volunteers and colleagues who expressed their willingness to help on One Network, have taken the time to prepare remarks, advise us on topics, and are serving as network event hosts throughout the country. Without your guidance, support, and expertise, this week would not be possible. I'm joined today by my colleagues and co-planners, Kelly O'Shaughnessy and Alex Beard. You'll hear more from them later on in this session. Before I turn things over to our guest presenter, Erin Ewart, I just have a few technology items to cover. Today's session is being recorded, and we will notify all registrants once the recording is available. Also, questions are welcome. Just scroll over the Zoom menu and look for the Q&A icon. Submit your questions there, and we will address as many questions at the end of Erin's presentation. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, William Mary alumna of the class of 2000, Erin Ewart. Erin is a career and leadership coach and the founder of Careers for Social Impact, an organization helping purpose-driven professionals grow in their careers. Prior to starting her business in 2014, she worked in talent and recruitment roles for a diverse set of organizations across the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, including Google, the U.S. State Department, and KIPP. She has coached thousands of social sector professionals and has been a featured partner and speaker with organizations including Impact Hub, General Assembly, Moving Worlds, Columbia Business School, and the University of Washington. Erin received her MBA with a focus in social enterprise from Columbia Business School and her BA in history from William & Mary. She lives in Brooklyn with her husband and 2 children. And as you listen to Erin's remarks, we encourage you to think about ways you can proactively develop yourself and your career through continued personal and professional learning, awareness of your strengths and weaknesses, navigation of career opportunities, and networking to build relationships within and without your organization. Without further ado, Erin Ewart.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's so great to be here. I always love coming back and connecting with the William & Mary community. So thank you so much for the introduction. I'm excited to jump in and talk about taking ownership of our careers today. Just one technical note. I see it looks like the chat is not working for folks yet. So Michael, I'm wondering if we should plan to use the Q&A function or if we're going to enable the chat for today. Okay.
Should work right now. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Okay. Fantastic. So try the chat again. I'm going to have a question that I'm going to bring up too. I know Alex at the beginning asked folks to share kind of where they're located. And I had a few questions for all of you just to help us get to know each other as we dive in. So just where you're joining from today and your favorite spot in Williamsburg. I know I love going back to visit when I can. So if you're able to go ahead and share in the chat, I would love to see your responses and get to know each other a little bit as we're getting started here. Giving it a second for some responses to flow in here. I gotta say, Cheese Shop is mine too. I took my kids there last year and now they love it too. And I get the exact same order I got as a student. So can't go wrong. Seeing lots of Cheese Shop votes. Might have a clear winner. Amazing. Thank you. Please keep sharing. Love seeing these and just reminiscing about our days at William & Mary. And I wanted to share a little bit about myself as well, as we get started here, and kind of my own career journey, some of the twists and turns that I've taken, so you can get to know me a little bit better. So, as Michael mentioned, I was a history major at William and Mary. I had a great experience on campus. You can see a picture of me there on the bottom left with some of my buddies circa 1997. And I came out of school, though, not knowing exactly what I wanted to do. So probably not alone in that. I moved to DC, maybe like some of you, after college, and took a few roles in HR and recruiting, which actually stemmed from some internships I had done on campus. So I worked in the career services office as an intern in my student days, doing some of that work. So I can kind of trace what I'm doing now all the way back to some of those internships I did during and after college. So I spent a few years doing that. And then I decided I wanted to try something different. So I joined the State Department as a Foreign Service Officer. I decided to kind of go on this international adventure, embark on an international career. Unfortunately, I discovered pretty quickly that that was not the right fit for me. And so that was a really important lesson. Now looking back, I can see pretty clearly why it wasn't the right fit. It was a very large organization. I was doing work that wasn't really aligned with my strengths. But at the time, as a 24, 25-year-old, I wasn't really clear on that yet. So I did that for a couple of years, realized that wasn't going to actually be my long-term career, which was kind of a tough realization. And then came back home, moved back to the States. And you can see this kind of star here. These reflect some of the big transition points for me in my own career. So that was a big one. I came back, I moved in with my parents for a while. It was really like starting over in a way that I hadn't anticipated. But I did kind of rebuild and restart. I went back to business school, as Michael mentioned, decided to get my MBA and really focus in on this idea of social enterprise and social impact, which was really empowering and interesting to me. Took a job with KIP, a national foundation in the education space, and then had another big career transition about 10 years ago now, when my husband and I moved to the West Coast. I left my job and I didn't know what was going to be next. I had another one of those moments of, kind of navigating what might be next for me. And out of that grew my business, Careers for Social Impact, which I'm still leading today. And it'll be 10 years in June of this year. So it's been an interesting journey. And then, as you can see on the right, moved back to New York about 5 years ago. I've had 2 kids, navigating COVID, and now I probably have a new chapter to add to this. So this is an example, I wanted to share a little bit about myself with you, but also help you think about an activity that you might want to do. And something we have our clients do often is kind of do a map of your career and go back to William and Mary days, or even before that, and kind of think about the different chapters, the different turning points and what you've learned along the way. And this can be a really, really helpful exercise to do periodically to start pulling out some themes. And as you can see on the bottom right there, some of the through lines, that I've identified in my own career are outlined there. So things that no matter what I've been doing have always been constants for me. So hopefully that helps you get to know me a little bit better. And about my organization, Careers for Social Impact. As I said, we're celebrating our 10th anniversary this year. We work with purpose-driven leaders, helping them navigate their career growth. So that looks like one-on-one career coaching. We also offer group coaching, a course that people can do online. So lots of different ways to work with us, and I'll share a bit more about those in a minute. But our focus is really on this idea of, how do you take ownership of your career, in particular, if you want to have a career that has kind of a bigger social mission. That's really the folks that we work with most. A few programs and events we have coming up, and you can check out our website, which we'll share at the end to learn more about these. But I would love to see you at some of them. We have networking events and workshops frequently, with one coming up in March. We have our next group program coming up in May. And then, as I said, we have, some other coaching and course options for folks. So just letting you know some of the work that we do and ways to connect with us. And then what we're going to be doing here today, we're going to talk a little bit just to kind of frame things up about why we're here, why it's so important to take ownership of your career. We're going to go through a framework that we've developed with 3 key questions to be thinking about when it comes to your career. And I'm going to ask you to reflect a little bit on those and give you an opportunity to just do a little bit of thinking and reflecting while we're here today. So have something to write with if you can, because I'll give you a few questions to answer along the way. And then we're going to talk about, how to keep this career focus moving forward. So how can you really make this an ongoing practice for yourself? And then we'll have some time for Q&A towards the end. So please do drop questions, as Michael said, in the Q&A space as we go, and we'll make time for those toward the end of our conversation. So we wanted to start out actually to learn a little bit about you and where you are with a quick poll, which I think Michael is going to open. And just tell us, in a quick answer to that, what describes your current career focus? Are you seeking a new role right now? Are you considering a career transition in the next 6 to 12 months? Or are you focused on growing in your career where you are? So which one of those best describes where you are today? We'll give that a few seconds for folks to vote. And Michael, if we've got some good responses, we can go ahead and share the answers. Wow. Okay, we're just almost exactly split in thirds. Amazing. And this is great. It's always just interesting to see kind of how it breaks down in terms of where you all are. And what we're going to talk about today is really relevant, no matter which of these applies to you, right? So, some of the questions and the frameworks we're going to talk about are absolutely going to support you wherever you are in this process. So thank you. Thanks for telling us a little bit about where you are. And hopefully now you know that wherever you are, you've got, lots of other people on this call who share that with you. All right, so why we're here, I want to hear from you one more time. Why do you think it's important to take ownership of your career? So you've taken an hour out of your day to be here with us today to make this commitment. Why is this important? So we'd love to hear a couple thoughts in the chat on this question. Yeah, because no one else will. Exactly. You are the owner of your career, right? Nobody else is going to think about this for you. Love that. Seeing some comments on a sense of purpose. Yeah, accomplishment and purpose, kind of tapping into that bigger sense of purpose. How does your work contribute to that? And fulfillment. Amazing. Yeah, these are great. Thank you. Please continue to share your thoughts in the chat as you have them around why this is important for you. And each of you might have slightly different answers to this, right? But it's important that you think about that and reflect on that a little bit. All right. And I have some thoughts too that I want to share, things that come up a lot in our work. One is, this is important because as we've seen, especially the last few years, right? Like so much can change so quickly out there in the job market. And I would say the last couple of years especially have been a little bit of a whiplash situation, right? Where, it was a job seekers market and then it wasn't. And now we're kind of in this gray area in between. But we really want to be, proactive and prepared. And, if you are taking that ownership role of your career, you'll be able to weather, some of these changes and some of the uncertainty that will always be out there when it comes to careers and jobs. Another thing is that, again, the pace of change is really accelerating. And so LinkedIn came out with a report maybe a month or two ago that said, the top 25 fastest growing jobs in the US, I think it was 2/3 of them didn't exist 20 years ago, right? So the jobs of the future, we don't know exactly what those are going to be yet. So the more you can be proactive and prepared, again, the more you'll be ready to jump on those future opportunities. And also we know that the average job tenure is about 4 years now, right? So we know that you're going to be making transitions more frequently. And so being prepared for that, being ready, knowing what you want, right? And being prepared to go after that will really help you as you go through that transition process, throughout your career. Another reason is that you are always changing. Right. So the things that were important to you 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even 2 years ago might look very different. Right. So I know that my life, especially since I had kids and started a business, the things that I prioritize are quite different. And, that's true for all of us. So, a lot of the comments in the chat were about, finding impact and purpose and intention. And so you really want to stay tuned into what you want, what's important to you, and know that that's going to shift along the way. And then I just want to emphasize, that this is really an ongoing practice. And so if there's one thing that you take away from today, I hope it's, some tools and some ideas to help you continue to reflect on your career and think about, what you want moving forward on an ongoing basis. So not just, when you might need a new job, but something that you can recommit to on a regular basis so you can check in on how you're feeling and what you're looking for. All right, so we're going to talk about these 3 career questions. And for each one, I'm going to share, some thoughts and then ask you all to reflect and capture some thoughts for yourself that you can take away from today. So this is our framework. And the 3 questions we're going to be talking about and thinking about today, starting on the left, are who am I today? Right? And that today is a very intentional addition, right? You really want to tune into, again, what is it that you want? What's energizing you? What's important to you right now? Which may, again, be different than it was a year or 2 or more the last time you checked in on this. And you want to think about on the second circle there, what do I want next? Right? What does that kind of future vision look like for me of where I want to go in my career? And that could be pretty clear. It could be kind of fuzzy still, right? But you want to be starting to shake that out and think about this. And then how can I get there? Right? So what are the actions I can take? What are the steps I can take to start moving in the direction I want to go in my career? And those can be small. They don't have to be, huge leaps necessarily. But the idea is to be taking some action, right? Taking some proactive steps towards where you want to go. So we'll start with that first question of who am I today? And so these are 3 things that I would encourage you to think about and reflect on related to this question of who am I today? The first is your core values. And so I know that, for a lot of our clients and even myself, they haven't reflected on this or they've never written down their values. Right. And I hadn't done that either until maybe 4 or 5 years ago. But it's a really important kind of compass and foundation as part of this process. And so, these are things that are guiding our decision making, they're guiding our choices, kind of, our core operating principles. Whether we're aware of them or not, they're guiding how we think and how we make decisions. And they're also a really important way to evaluate potential career opportunities, potential organizations that you might want to work for. You really want to make sure there's a values alignment there, right, between what's important to you and what the organization values. And often when we see, roles not working out or people experiencing burnout in their career, it's because of a values misalignment. So this is something to kind of center on as you start this process or as you engage in this process. And, there are some good exercises out there that can help you kind of hone in on your core values. You can also think about, things that bother you, things that might anger you or frustrate you are a really good sign, kind of signal or clue to something that might be a core value for you. So for me, one of mine is balance. One of my core values is balance. I really value kind of keeping a balance between work and life and family. And when that starts getting infringed on, like when I feel like one of those areas is taking up too much space or too much time for me, I can feel myself getting really frustrated, right? And unhappy. So, so tuning into your values is something I would encourage you to think about. We also want to think about strengths. I'm going to talk more about those in a minute, but really the things that you're best at, right? Kind of the unique strengths, the unique gifts that you bring into the world and into the workplace, and really getting clear on what those are. And aligned to that, energizers and drainers, right? So paying attention to what are the things that energize you throughout the day, what activities at work, do you feel really good after doing, and what feels more draining or exhausting to you. And so I mentioned strengths, and we're going to kind of double click on that here for a minute, because again, I think this is important. And this is another area where, if someone asks you today what your biggest strengths are, you may not be able to articulate them right away. So we want to be reflecting on this. We want to be getting clear on what these are, both so that we can find opportunities that are going to be a good fit, and so that we can share them with others, right? And talk about the things that we're really best at. So strengths are really this intersection of things that you're good at and things that energize you. And I think that's important because we often focus on the first, right? Like things that I'm good at, things that other people recognize me for, but they may not be the things that bring you energy. And so I just encourage you to, really think about where those things overlap, and recognize that some of the things that you've done in your career or that other people might kind of think that you're great at may not be your true strengths, right? So it might take another level of investigating and thinking about this to get down to what those are and what you really enjoy. And then there are 3 ways to identify your strengths. So one is reflecting, which we're going to do in a minute. I'm going to ask you to think about this. So just thinking about, some of the peak experiences in your life, the times where you felt really energized, where you were really having an impact, starting to think about those and what commonalities they share, what skills you were using in those experiences. You can also ask others, so friends, family members, colleagues. A great question to ask is, when have you seen me at my best? And ask that of a variety of people in your life and see what themes emerge from that. And then there are some assessments that you can take. There are a few that we recommend. One is the Clifton Strengths, used to be known as Strengths Finder. And then another is called the Sparketype. And I think Michael's dropping those in the chat. We'll also have those on the website as a follow-up from today. But those are another way, right, to get some objective feedback on what your strengths are. And so you ideally want to kind of use all 3 of these and then see what comes out, see what the commonalities are from these 3 different ways of looking at your strengths. So now I'm going to turn it over to you and ask you to do a little bit of thinking on this question of who I am today, specifically your strengths. And so you'll see up there on the screen the question, what's an accomplishment that you're proud of? It can be personal or professional, can be from, something recent, something farther in the past, just something that comes to mind, something you're proud of. And then take a minute to just think about why that was meaningful to you and what strengths or skills were you using in that experience. I'll give you a few seconds to just think about that, make a note. And once you've done that, I would love to see in the chat a strength or skill that you identify in thinking about that example. And I see Kim's comment about Clifton Strengths. I love that you know your top 5. That's a great foundation. So why was the experience meaningful, and what was a strength or skill that you were using in that experience? Seeing a few responses coming in. Empathy, Rebecca, observation. Amazing. Yeah. Leadership, writing, consensus building. Great. Seeing some answers starting to flow in. So this is a great start, right? In just 30 seconds, you just identified something that might be a core strength of yours, right? And obviously this will take a little bit more time, a little bit more reflection, but I would really encourage you to identify several different examples, right? 3, 4, or 5 more if you want, but really kind of think back and think about the times where you've really enjoyed your work, or you've really enjoyed something in your personal life too, because our strengths show up there, and think about what those commonalities are and what those strengths are as a foundation for this process. I love that you all know your strengths and you're sharing them in the chat. These are great to see. Okay, so we're going to move on to our second question, which is, what do I want next? Right? And this can be tricky because, sometimes we feel like we don't know, or we feel like there's a whole universe of opportunities out there and we don't know where to begin. And so there are, some tools and some ways to start to think about this and start to narrow that down. Right? And so a few that I want to emphasize are, one, just thinking about your career vision. And really, it's a bigger vision for your life and your career, right? Because we know that career is one part of the life that we lead, an important part, but not everything. And one way to get at this is just to sit down and, do some writing about a specific day in the future. We recommend 10 years from now, just because that gives you enough distance. And just write about what does that day look like for you, from the time that you get up in the morning until you go to bed at night, including work, but not limited to work, right? And just allow yourself to kind of put down whatever comes up for you, and see what that shows you, right, in terms of what you might want and where you're looking to go in the future. So that's a place to start, is just tapping into what do I envision for myself, right, from a career perspective and a life perspective. Then you can map out some potential career pathways. And pathways, is multiple, right? Because for all of us, there's not just one right next step. And I think that's an important reframe in this process, that sometimes we get caught up in finding like the perfect right answer in our careers. And the reality is that there is none, right? Like there are multiple things that we could all do that could be fulfilling and that could make us happy. So we want to generate some ideas, ideally 2 or 3, that are interesting, that we would want to explore as a future career step. And then you also want to get clear on those top priorities, right? So when you think about your career future, your next chapter in your career, what are those most important things for you? And you want to have that kind of short list of must-haves, which could be anything from, the type of organizational culture you want to be a part of, to the salary that you want to make, to the flexibility that you need, right? There's lots of different dimensions to that, and it will be personal, but you do want to spend some time really thinking about those and writing them down so that you've got that roadmap. So we're going to dial in on the career pathways question here for a minute. And I want to share a tool from a book called Designing Your Life, which is one I highly recommend if you haven't heard of it yet. It's a great companion to this process of thinking about designing your career as well as your life. And this is an exercise called the Odyssey Plans. This is where this comes from. And the idea here is that you identify 3 potential futures for yourself. And as you can see here, option 1 is kind of the more linear option, right? Like what would be kind of the next step that you're already thinking about, or that would make sense given where you are now. The second option is what you'd do if that was not possible anymore. If that just went away and was no longer an option, what's something else that comes to mind? And then option 3 is kind of the more far out option of, time and money or no object, what would you want to do? And I find that this is a really good brainstorming and idea generation tool, right? Because it gets you out of that linear thinking of exactly where you might go next, and allows you to, explore some other options, imagine some other options for your career. And even if these 3 things don't ultimately become the ones you pursue, it can get you thinking, and it can get you, brainstorming about options. And this is a fun activity to do with other people too, if you have other folks in your life that are considering what they want to do in their careers. So I offer that as a fun activity that you can follow up on. And Michael has linked to that book in the chat if you want to check it out. And just a couple examples of what this can look like, right, as you're envisioning those future pathways. Sometimes it might mean, a move within your organization or looking at other opportunities, right? So those internal or external moves. Sometimes it might be, a longer term career vision, right? Kind of thinking about where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years and starting to build those skills. And sometimes it might be doing something, outside of your day-to-day, right? So, starting to test out a business idea or something else that you might want to pursue, right? So again, it doesn't always have to be this, huge pivot. It can be making smaller changes in your work to help you look and move towards what's next. So I'm going to ask you to reflect again on this one. And I'm not going to ask you to do your 10-year vision right now, because I imagine you might want some time with that. But I am going to ask you to think about 1 year from now, right? So let's say it's February 28th of 2025. And what's one shift you want to have made in your career? And again, that could be something major. It could be something that seems smaller, right? But just something that you want to have shifted a year from now. And then what impact is that having on your work and life if you think ahead 1 year from now? Take a minute and think about that. And again, I would love to hear your shifts, your potential shifts in the chat once you've had a chance to note those down. All right, starting to see some responses. then to be working for myself. Yeah, that's a big one. That's great. And so what we're going to talk about next, once you've thought about your shift, is, what are some steps that you want to take to move toward that? So love that. See, adapting to being a working mom. Yeah, what a big shift, right? Being a parent and working and balancing those things. Let's see a few more before we move on. What other shifts are you all thinking about over the next year? Shifting to a career that allows for more creative or socially impactful work. Yes, thank you, Caitlin. So that values work, right, is important there, right? Connecting to those values and finding work that corresponds to those. Fantastic. All right. We'll keep sharing in the chat. I'm going to continue just so that we do have some time for Q&A. But I know these are big questions, right? Big questions to answer in just a few minutes. But hopefully this gets you thinking and reflecting on where you're looking to go over these next 12 months. All right. So the third piece of this framework is the how, right? How can I get there? I've got this idea about a shift that I might want to make, and what is it that I'm going to do to get there? And so the three things that I want to mention here, the first is this idea of career experiments, right? So just like any kind of design process, we want to test things out, right? So if we're looking to, start a business, for example, or move into a new field or make a pivot, or even find a better balance, right, in work and life, we've got to try some things. We've got to learn, right, versus just jumping into the next thing without knowing what that's going to be like. My 24-year-old self who leaped into a new career without testing it out first learned that lesson early on, and so I think this is an important one. So we'll talk about that in a minute. People and story are an important part of this, right? So we know that our careers are so dependent on other people, right? We learn from other people, we get support from other people. So we want to be kind of building and tapping into our personal and professional networks as a part of this process, both to learn, from other folks who might be doing the things that we're interested in, and to just get that support, right? Career change or transition or planning, it can feel like a lonely process, but as you can see from everybody who's on this webinar today, lots of people are thinking about it. So we can build, that support network for ourselves as well. And then we want to think about that story, right? What is your career story today as you think about, the shifts that you're looking to make? And are there changes that you might need to make it reflect who you are now, right? And those core strengths that we talked about earlier. So that's something that evolves with us, right? The story that we tell about our careers. And then finally, the action plan and accountability, right? So we know that, to make a change or to, make a shift in your career, you got to have a plan and you got to have some accountability. So I'm going to ask you to think about that in a few minutes and the kind of accountability that you might need. So I'm going to dial in on this idea of career experiments here. And you can see some of the ideas that we recommend. This is certainly not an exclusive list. There are many more things you can do. But the idea here is to pick something, relatively small to start and test it out, right? So again, if you were looking to go out on your own, for example, how might you take on a project or talk to other people who've started their own businesses to learn from them, right? As just two examples. But you'll see there are three categories here. On the left is more of the research and reflection, right? So you could look at job descriptions of positions that might be interesting to you and just look at what's interesting, right? What do you see across different job descriptions that jumps out at you? You could look at the backgrounds of people doing the kind of work you want to be doing. You could just immerse yourself in a new field that you're interested in, reading, listening, right? Just kind of soaking it all in. And so these are more individual, right? These are things that you can do more on your own. In the middle, we start to get more social, right? We start to have those informational chats, informational interviews with people. We might join industry groups and start going to events, conferences. Job shadowing is something that not a lot of people do anymore, but it's a great tool to just, visit somebody and kind of learn more about what they do in their day-to-day. And then the experiential category on the right, starts to get, depending on how you approach it, it could start to be a little bit more of a commitment, but you can start small too, right? You could take on a one-time volunteer engagement with an organization that you're interested in. You could take on a small side project to test something out. You could take a class, right? That doesn't have to mean going back and getting a new degree. So these are all ways that you can start, again, to build experience, but also to just learn about what a career path that you're interested in might look like. And for those of you, I know several of you said work-life balance in the chat. It could be an experiment where you just design your schedule differently, right? Like, so I'm gonna, one thing I've done, and I know a lot of other folks who are able to, right, is try to have a day per week where you don't have meetings, right? Or maybe half a day, right? Just as one example. Or maybe it might be, retooling your schedule. Maybe it might be setting new boundaries, right? But think about things that you could do to test out the ideal that you want, right? And see what that could look like, and know that it might take some trial and error to get to the right balance for you. All right. So again, I'm going to ask you to do one last reflection here, which is considering what you just thought about in terms of your shift that you want to make in a year. What's one experiment, however small it might feel, that you could try? One step you could take to learn or to test out something new. So think about that. And again, would love to see some shares in the chat. Okay, Nicole, I could try a contract role or small project. Exactly, right? Take on something small, reach out to people in your network and say, hey, I'm looking to take on a few projects or one project. Do you know anybody who needs this? Or would you be willing to, to collaborate with me on this? That's a great way to get started. And there are also organizations, out there that are looking for people to do, volunteer consulting projects, right? So that's another way to get some of that experience. What else? What other types of experiments could you all try? I'd love to see a few more examples in the chat, because we can learn from other people's ideas too. You might see something that resonates with you that you haven't thought about. All right, seeing a few more coming in. An online certification class. Love that, Cynthia. Yep. One course, it could be a certification, but different ways to build your skills and try things out. And don't be afraid to ask someone to job shadow. Yes, exactly. And I love that comment. It showed me what I don't want to do, which is part of this, right? Like the whole point of doing an experiment is to find out, like, is this actually what I want before you take that bigger step, right? So really tune into, as you do these experiments, am I feeling more excited about this idea? Or as I learn more, am I feeling like, I'm not sure if this is for me, right? And you can continue to tune into that as you take bigger steps. Fantastic. So thank you. Continue to share in the chat, please, because I think, again, you might get great ideas from what other people are thinking about. And yes, informational conversations, networking is kind of like the standard here, right? Like just talking to people about their experiences. So that is definitely something I encourage you to do. And it's not the only way, right, to learn. All right, so the very last thing I want to share before we turn it over to Q&A, so please do drop questions if you have them. We'll get to that in just a few minutes, is how to think about keeping your career goals in focus, right? So we've talked about some of the things you can be doing. And I know, especially, if you're more in that, not in that active job search or career transition right now, it can be hard, right? Given all the other things you have going on in your life to keep this in focus or keep this front and center. So what I want to suggest is a career ownership practice, right? Something that you can be doing on a regular basis, and for things that you can be reflecting on. And we have an exercise, a quarterly career exercise that I believe Michael will drop in the chat. There it is. So you're welcome to take that and use this. And as the name indicates, it's something that we encourage folks to just block out time for on a quarterly basis. again, whether you're planning a career transition or not, kind of keeping this regular focus on your career is going to really be beneficial for you and just alert you to, some of the areas where you might want to grow and some of the things that you might want to be focusing on moving forward. And so the 4 areas that you'll see outlined in that exercise, we've talked about most of these already, but on the left, starting with priorities, what's most important to you and how are those things shifting, right? How are those different than they might have been the last time you checked in? Is there anything new that's coming up for you as a priority that you want to capture? And are there any adjustments that you need to make? Checking in on your plan, right? So, are you achieving the goals that you set for yourself? Are you spending the time that you anticipated, on your career goals? How are those experiments going, right? So just creating some structure and accountability around that. The people piece, right? So that's obviously an important part of this. How are you growing and cultivating your network, and making sure that that's an ongoing practice? Even saying, I'm going to have one networking conversation a month, just even with people I already know, right? Just to keep those connections alive, because we don't want to be, again, we don't want to only be networking when we're looking for a new opportunity. We really want to be cultivating that as a practice as you go. And then finally, proof. Right. So going back to those examples of accomplishment, it's a lot easier to capture those as they happen. We often have people come to us and they're, looking for a new opportunity and they have to go back and kind of reconstruct all the things that they've done over the last, 3, 4, 5 years or longer, because they haven't written them down. And so I would just encourage you to kind of get in this regular practice, at least once a quarter, of writing down, what were your wins and what were some of the details so that you can come back to those, right? Whether it's for your performance review, whether it's for, a new job opportunity that you want to pursue, you're going to be so well served by having that ongoing list of accomplishments kind of ready to talk about, versus trying to go back and remember them all. So these are 4 things to just think about on that ongoing basis. And then lastly, I just want to close with talking about accountability, right? So this is something we all need, and we might need it in different ways, but we all need it. It's a really important factor in our success on all kinds of things, right? Whether it's, going to the gym, completing a work project, or, focusing on careers. And it's really important for things like this that might be, not urgent, right? They might not be the top thing that's like screaming for your attention, but it's something that you want to be intentional about, something that you want to bring focus to. And so I'm curious to hear, around accountability, some of the things that we often recommend are, having an accountability buddy, right, around this work. That can be super helpful. Just a partner who is also thinking about their career goals. Putting that time on your calendar for that quarterly career review, just blocking it out, right? Having a regular recurring calendar meeting can be a helpful accountability source. Those are two things we often recommend. Even having, virtual co-working time where you can hop on a Zoom with other folks and kind of knock out some of the career work that you want to do. But I'm curious to hear if there's anything else, that's worked for you in terms of accountability that you might want to bring in to the space of thinking about your career as we wrap up. Any accountability practices? I see Paul's note in the chat, keeping the discipline of this practice. This is exactly it. Right? How do you kind of keep that structure for yourself as you move forward? Wondering if any of those are things you might want to try, or if there are other accountability tricks that have worked for you in other spaces that you would want to bring in here. All right, Joanne, I made a purpose statement and had someone sign it as a witness. Wow, amazing. Yeah, what a great commitment. Right? Having that witnessed by someone else. And often just saying things out loud, right? Just saying them to somebody else is a wonderful source of accountability. Like once you've told someone else, you're much more likely to do it. Thank you for that share. And I'm going to ask you all to share what you're going to do in a minute and kind of make that public commitment too. All right, so think about anything else related to accountability, but I want to close out so that we do have some time for Q&A and anything that might be on your mind. So as I said, I want to, ask you to reflect as we wrap up on one insight or idea that you're going to take away from today, and then one next step that you're committing to. So one action that you want to take, again, can be small. It doesn't have to be, you know, a major project that you're taking on, but one next step that you want to commit to coming out of our conversation today. So take a minute to jot those down, and then I'll invite you to share one of those with us in the chat. So either an idea that you're taking away or a next step that you're committing to once you have those down. All right, I'm seeing some answers flowing in. We're going to take Clifton's strengths, do some more assessments, write about our future day in 10 years, asking other people what they think strengths are. Amazing. Great, thank you. Please keep these coming. And just, you know, most importantly, make sure that you note them down for yourself, right? We love to see them here, but make sure that you take them away as well. All right, and then I'll just close with a few recommended resources. I've mentioned all of these, I think, as we've gone, and Michael has shared them in the chat, but just to recap, those assessments were the Clifton strengths and the Sparketype. The reflection exercise that we shared is our quarterly career planning exercise, and then 2 books. I mentioned Designing Your Life, and then there's another one called Pivot by Jenny Blake, which is also about this kind of career process and how to think about shifts in your career. So those are 2 that I would recommend. So with that, I'm going to pause my sharing here and turn it over to Michael, who's, I think, going to moderate some Q&A. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
And thank you, Erin. For those that don't know, and I didn't say this in the intro, but Erin has been a great volunteer in offering her expertise in coaching over the years. Since we were discussing earlier, I think 2017, we started doing some programs together. So definitely look back at some of her other webinars as well in our webinar archive. And I think you'll see some additional materials that over the years that you can use. So we do have some questions, Erin, and what are you seeing in the industry regarding how businesses are embracing purpose-driven values? In particular, it seems that some of these commitments are being sidelined in favor of cost-cutting, stockholder values. Do you see the backpedaling happening where companies are stepping away from value-driven practices of the more recent years?
Such a great question. The short answer is yes, we do see some of that, right? I think there was a lot that happened over the last couple of years, you know, whether it's sustainability commitments, ESG commitments, diversity and equity commitments that organizations made, right? And then some of them have found it hard to sustain those. And especially in the last, you know, 6 months or so, we have seen, you know, more pulling back, right, or more backlash on some of those initiatives. So, you know, my hope is that it's, you know, it's kind of a temporary wave, and that the arc is ultimately, you know, heading up in terms of more organizations realizing that this is, you know, the way to do business, and also the way to attract great people who want to work for values-driven organizations. But it's something to be aware of, right? And we talk about this a lot in our work, that you know, every organization, if you go to their website, they'll have their values, right? They'll say like, oh, these are our, you know, amazing values. This is, you know, how we operate. Those may or may not actually play out, right, in terms of what your experience is like as an employee. So it's really important, you know, as you do that work on your own values, to then think about, how am I going to ask about these things that are important to me, and the things that the employer has said, you know, that are important to them. How am I going to really understand those, you know, during an interview process, or even during informational interviews, right? So being able to frame up questions that really help you understand, you know, if the value is collaboration, for example, just to throw one out there, like, what does that actually look like, right? How are decisions being made? You know, what is, you know, how do teams collaborate with each other? Or what does the real day-to-day look like in that organization? And then, you know, when it comes to asking those questions, just like employers will ask you for specific examples, they'll be like, tell me about a time you solved a big problem or something like that. You can ask those kinds of questions as well, right? So, tell me what your, diversity commitment looks like in practice here. Give me an example of, how that's embedded into your hiring practices or into your employee retention, right? So you might need to be creative, but really think about how you can kind of get under the hood a little bit and ask about what those commitments are, and know that yes, they're not always the things that are shared on the website, and that's part of this journey of taking ownership is really understanding what's important to you and how the organization reflects that.
Wonderful. And for those that are able to make it at 3 o'clock, we're going to be talking about cultivating organizational culture. So with some HR leaders at various companies around the country. So great question to bring back to that panel as well. So thank you for asking that question. One more question here. I think we have, depending on how time is on this one, how do you help others face their fears of making a change in career? We've all have friends or family members, hard with family members sometimes because, the other context. But, I think it is a common question of how can we be supportive and say the right things to people that are in this career transition.
Yeah. Another great question. I think a couple of things come to mind. One, first is just, normalizing that, yes, this process, like it's normal to be afraid of change, right? It's part of how we're wired as humans. Like we want things to stay the same. We want to stay safe. And anytime we're embarking on something new, something that's unknown, it's going to trigger those fears, right? So I think part of it is just acknowledging that, yes, it's going to feel scary. There are going to be times of uncertainty. There are going to be ups and downs in the process. So that's one. I think two would be really anchoring on that vision of what you want, right? So why, like, what's your why? Why is it that you're looking to make a change, right? Going back to that idea of your future vision, do you want, maybe it's having more of an impact. Maybe it's, being able to spend more time with your family. Maybe it's, thinking about, being in an organization that is going to be more values aligned. Going back to the last question, but like, what is it that's kind of pulling you forward and really reminding yourself of that? I think is another piece. And then the last I would say is really thinking about those small steps, right? So recognizing that when you're making a change, it doesn't have to happen all at once, right? I think sometimes that's what can trigger a lot of the fears. Like I have to do this big thing, right? I have to kind of leap off this cliff and not know what's there. And so just going back to what we've talked about today, I think, it's taking those small steps, doing it incrementally, learning along the way, building your confidence and your skills, right? On an ongoing basis can really help mitigate some of that, and help you feel more like it's a transition that you're on, right? And sometimes that takes longer than we would like, right? Sometimes we just want to be on the other side of it. We're like, I don't like being in this messy middle of transition. I just want it to be done. But the reality is that we have to spend some time in that space learning and kind of working through the fear. And last thing I'll add is just like having that support system in place, as I mentioned, is so important. So whether that's family and friends or just other people who are in a similar situation, that can make a really big difference in kind of working through some of the emotions that come up in this process.
Wonderful. I mean, one final advice I would say is if you were a student on today's audience member, what advice would you give that student, given your background at William & Mary, your experiences there, being a career coach, what wisdom, and working at the Career Center, what wisdom would you share to a current student who this conversation may seem a little 5-10 years away, but I think there's some great lessons that you've shared today. And I'm curious, what advice in your sort of last question here would you want them to take away from today's session?
Yeah. I think there are two things that might seem a little conflicting, but I think they're both important. One is that, even as a student, probably more than you think about what you're good at and what you like, right? So even thinking about, what have you decided to major in? What are the classes that you like? What are the activities that you enjoy most? Right? Even as a student or recent grad, there are themes there that you can really tune into about, again, what energizes you, what your strengths are, and what you might want to do. in your career, right? So I would encourage folks to, even if it feels a little fuzzy early on, to kind of pay attention to those things, pay attention to those signals. And then the second would be, I think early in your career, you're going to have to try some different things, right? More so, I think the more experience we build, the more we start to kind of narrow in a little bit, or get a better sense of what we like and what we don't. But when you're early in your career, that can be tough because you just don't have as much of that experience. So gaining as many experiences as you can through internships or through, part-time work when you're a student can be helpful, but know that, those first 3 to 5 years of your career might be, trying some different things and really seeing what works for you and building from there. So, so a lot of things, and you also need to try some things to continue to learn. And I would just keep both of those in mind.
Thank you. Now I'm going to turn it over to Macaulay Kelly O'Shaughnessy to close out some final remarks. And thank you again, Erin, for all that you do for the William Mary community and for a terrific presentation today. Kelly.
Also, I'd like to share my thanks to Erin for sharing your knowledge and advice and your stories with the full William Mary community today. And to the point that Michael was just sharing about students, we have similar resources as well as a few others that might feel more approachable to where you are in your stage right now, whether it be major exploration or career exploration, on wm.edu/career. And you can go to the student section, the career exploration page. So in addition to all of the wonderful resources that Erin shared today, you have those as well. We really appreciate, Erin, the time and effort you put into preparing today's session, and especially helping all of us see how we can take ownership of our own careers with very accessible step-by-step reflection questions. These are things that seem very usable and very tangible to approach a quarterly process with us. And we really appreciate that they can be applied to all stages of your career paths. As Michael mentioned in the beginning of the session, we are working to connect this week to the NACE Career Readiness Competencies. And today's session is definitely hit on career and self-development, every aspect of it. We ask that you take a few minutes today, which Erin has already had you share in the chat. Write them down for yourselves to keep. You shared with everyone here today what you plan to do next and what your goals are, what exercises you're going to use. All of these resources and links will be available soon on the Professional Development Week webpage. So you'll be able to access them there as well, hopefully by the end of the week. At this point now, I'm going to pass it over to Alex to help give you some ideas on how you can continue the conversation.
All right, thanks, Kelly. So everyone, thank you so much for being part of today's session. I encourage you to join us later today. We have a session at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, Cultivating Organizational Culture. Your continued participation is greatly appreciated. If you're available on Friday at noon Eastern Standard Time, we would highly encourage you to join us for the online networking hour. It is a great opportunity to meet your peers all over the world from William & Mary. In addition to that, I just want to quickly share my screen and show you, we will have a thread for today's sessions on One Network. If you haven't already seen this, this is our online professional networking platform. And this platform, we will have essentially on the main feed here a post that will be pinned for today. We would love any key takeaways you gleaned from Erin and her session and all the great content that she shared. We would love for you to drop that in here. Let's have a threaded dialogue and a conversation. If you have any questions about One Network or Professional Development Week, you can feel free to reach out to the team, onenetwork@wm.edu, and it is onenetwork.wm.edu for this website. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you soon.